Welcome to another episode of Meet the Author Live. I'm your host, John Saunders, executive coach and author and host of the show. This is an opportunity to learn everything valuable there is to know about the author, their work, and their journey to publishing their books. As we go, we will answer your questions live in the chat, so make sure we know how everyone knows how to use the chat, please drop in there where you're joining us from today. It's always really interesting to see where everyone's calling in from, oftentimes from all over the world. And if you're one of the companies that are featured in the book, by all means, let us know that as well. Today, we're meeting a brand new author. I'm honored to introduce you to Lorraine Margherita, who published her book, Shared Decision Making in the Corporate Arena, A Journey into Organizational Cultures and of Autonomy and Responsibility. It just came out a few weeks ago. A little bit about Lorraine before I bring her on. Lorraine is an organizational consultant. She co-designs and facilitates collective dynamics, most often in large and multicultural organizations. Among other changes, she helps clients bring decision-making to the right level of their organization, given their specific culture and ambition, empowering team members throughout an organization. To this day, she has worked with more than 6,000 managers and leaders in groups of 8 to 30 people in Europe, North America, and Australia, with companies such as Louis Vuitton, Lego, and many more. She is the chief mission officer of a network of coaches and consultants, the Shaker Company, and she is active in networks supporting purpose and mission-driven organizations, sociocracy, and learning organizations, among others. A French national, Lorraine lived in the U.S. twice and is now resettled in Paris, where she gave the name Codynamics to her consulting business. Lorraine, great to see you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, John. I'm thrilled to be here.
It is a pleasure to have you on. Before we get into the book, I think it's good for people to know, what the heck is collective dynamics all about?
I like that question. Oh, well, it's built on collective intelligence, which is what happens when you bring different people together. And the notion of collective dynamics means that you take them somewhere or you create the energy for them to accomplish something together. Oftentimes, I say that my work is to bring different people together to accomplish something that they couldn't do on their own. So that's what collective dynamics is all about, bringing all those people together and reach a shared purpose.
Really, it sounds like you're creating a movement here inside of companies. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely, yeah. We often start with a small group of people, oftentimes the leaders of the company, and then we go into larger and larger circles, bringing as many people as necessary into the dynamics.
That is amazing. Thank you for sharing that and bringing a little bit of clarity to it. And I want to just showcase a couple of people that already dialed in. We've got a group already from a global audience. James White, thanks for joining us. Hello, James. Got a friend from Mexico City. I think you've done some work down there. Is that right, Lorraine?
I interviewed Victor Hugo for my book.
Oh, very nice. Thanks for joining us, Victor. Hello. Kelly, thank you for joining us from Kansas City. Let's see, John Scott.
John Scott is a peer. We've worked together many times in many different countries.
Oh, nice. So we've got Mexico, USA, Sweden.
Annika is a peer as well. Yeah.
Annika, thank you. Ashley, I just met her a couple weeks ago. She hosted a book talk. Great to see you, Ashley, on here. Victor, I think, Vienna, Austria.
Yeah.
We've got a few time zones covered here, my friend. I love it.
This is a peer as well. John Scott is calling from Dubai this time. Yeah. He works in the US and Dubai, so that's nice.
Yes. Thank you for bringing the bubbles, Miriam, to the talk here.
My favorite drink, actually.
So already a big global audience dialing in. So Lorraine, thank you all for dropping those notes in the chat. And as you have questions and comments, please do the same. So Lorraine now has her book out, available wherever you buy books online, Amazon, wherever you might go find them. But Lorraine, how does it feel to have your name on the cover of a book and have it out there anywhere you can get books?
It's quite something, but I have to say at the beginning, I didn't realize, the book was out and I felt like there was so much to do and it was sort of taking a life of its own and I didn't really realize. And it's with the help of others that I get to realize what it means to have a book out. And I have to say that in the last few days, I realized the responsibility of having my last name on the book because it is other people's last name as well. So I'm proud. I have to say I'm proud. It's pretty impressive.
I mean, sometimes I've heard people say before, and particularly because I know a lot of authors. They say, "Well, gosh, everyone's out there writing a book," but when you actually do the math, it is a fraction of a percent of people that actually ever finish a book and certainly have one out there published. So it's an amazing accomplishment, and I certainly congratulate you on that, and so excited to have your book out there in the world.
Thank
So
you.
let's get into a little bit about what drove you to do this, right? It's no easy task. So, what really pushed you to go through those long days and long nights? I know when I wrote my book, which came out in 2020, there were many nights sitting in this very chair at 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning trying to get it done with other responsibilities. So what was your why behind this book that really drove you to get it done?
Before I answer on mine, I just want to point out that your book about the optimizer has a lot in common with some of the topics I tackle in mine. So I highly recommend reading your book as well.
Well, thank you for saying that.
So I've always been interested in stories. When I first heard about the first ones, maybe more than 10 years ago, I heard stories about leaders who sort of stepped out and let their teams make more decisions, or they brought them on board earlier in the decisions that they would have to implement. And I was quite fascinated, actually, interested at least, but sometimes even fascinated by how it went and the outcome of these stories. And I started to gather them so that I could share them with my clients. So oftentimes I tell them a story, whether it's in their industry or not, in their country or not, to show them how others handle responsibility and autonomy in their teams. And I gathered all those stories, and at some point I realized that I could share more stories, or at least with more people, if I wrote a book. And to me, those stories are very important because they can really change the outcome for a team and an organization. And I remember a few years ago, I met with a man named Lionel Guérin, who was the CEO of a company called Hop. So those in France know that company. It's a regional company combined with 3 different very local companies, airlines within the group Air France. And his posture started with let's trust people to do what they know how to do. And he often tells, I spoke with a manager a few weeks ago who used to work with him and has said, he told me at some point, you've worked so much on your topic that you know more about the topic than I do. So just go ahead and make the decisions. And so that's really what I'm after, because you can see the outcome of those stories when they bring people together, trust the teams to do the most. And oftentimes they do better and more than if you had told them ahead of time what you expect from them.
Giving them that autonomy, that greater responsibility, it really empowers them. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, and it brings more results to them, because they oftentimes, if people listen to you and appreciate your advice and your take on the situation that you face every day, you feel better, right? And if you have a chance to say what you think about the situation, to provide ideas, to try things out, in the end, the company is much better off and it goes faster. So,
Right. And it can seem slow at first, right? But once you get people engaged in the
right.
process and the movement, as you like to call it, it really changes the dynamic of the circumstance and can drive such better outcomes. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what we did with Hub. Hub was, I was part of the team who worked with that company, and we were hired at a point when the company didn't know if they would exist, not even survive, because it was a creation, based on 3 companies, as I said. And so at some point they didn't know if the business model was sound. So it was sort of their job to prove it. And the leadership team decided to trust the team to bring everyone together. One of the things we worked on was what we call the power to decide. And they turned it into I Dare. They chose the name themselves. So the program changed from Power to Decide to I Dare, which says it all. And we worked in circles. So the leadership team for a number of months, and then the management team with 2 different groups. And then we brought on board 200 key players and the ambassadors that were in charge of transferring the program into the teams. So yeah, it does take time at the beginning. And then after some point, things go much faster because they are in the teams. They know what they have to do. They share the purpose. They know in what direction they're working. And so after a while, it goes much faster, much deeper, and it's much closer to the culture of the company too, which makes it much more successful in the end.
I
And
shared
so the
this.
end of the story with Hop actually is that they not only did they prove that the business model would work, but they proved it ahead of schedule. And they chose, at some point, punctuality as an indicator for everyone in the company. So even if you were an accountant, for example, you were also considered as being in charge of making sure that the planes would be as on time as possible. And the year after we finished the program, they actually won an award at the European level for being the most punctual airline in Europe. So.
And it all started with this idea of bringing decisions together, sharing sharing some ownership in the decisions, and all taking, it sounds like accountability. But when you do it collectively, I think that accountability comes a lot more easily, right? Based on values, is what I'm hearing.
Yes, values, culture. It's very important to really connect with what the company is at the core.
Amazing. And, so let's get into the book here a little bit. Shared decision making in the corporate arena. So we have a good sense of what drove you to do this now, and certainly a great story with Hop there. But so, what is the book about? What are we going to learn from shared decision making in the corporate arena?
So the book is about what is important to me is the book is about real life stories. So it's mostly about the stories of those leaders and teams that decided to change the way decisions were made in their organization. And it helps gather some of the concepts behind their programs or their initiatives. So I interviewed 19 people in 15 different companies in 14 different countries, because I was trying to cover a number of industries and countries to show that it's not country or industry dependent. And I also researched another 15 or so stories, different organizations as well in different countries. So it's really a way to show how changing the way decisions are made impacts the people who will be in charge of implementing the decision. So that's the first level. And I was telling about the first stories I heard in that area. They often start with that notion that maybe we should handle the teams differently and give them more room. So that's the first section, the first part of the book, and the first circle, I would say. A larger circle is how to make the organization more sustainable, because we oftentimes tend to forget that organizations are not supposed to live forever. So it is kind of maybe not a miracle, but it is a performance when a company lasts more than a few decades. So the sustainability of the company is the second impact that the shared decision making can improve. And the third impact is the responsibility of the organization towards the environment and the society around, even when they're not directly connected. It's not only the client, it's not only the suppliers or the business partners, it's also everything that's around a company. So a company is responsible for the impact it has on the world.
Such a powerful message, right? Sometimes we can get caught up in let's make money today, make our shareholders happy, things like this. But companies have such a broader impact on the world in so many facets of it, particularly with sustainability. I'm curious, Lorraine, where did your passion or energy for sustainability come from?
That's a good question. I actually, when I see all those organizations, so I interviewed organizations like Airbus, Patagonia, Thales, Orange, large organizations that have been around for a while. I did research on Visa, who created a very powerful model at some point, Danone, HCL Tech, all those different companies. They show that they've been around for a long time, and sometimes when you go back to the creation of the company, you realize that the core, what has oftentimes become the purpose of the company, that's how we call that today, has been around for a very long time. Is actually it was there at the beginning, with different words. They wouldn't use the word purpose at the time, but when you think about the story of the founders and the way the company reacted to different changes and managed to survive over the decades, you realize that the initial story is very powerful, and the reason why it survived. And one of the examples I can think of, and maybe some people in the room come from that company, is so in French we say Le Roi Merlin, so maybe that would be Leroy Merlin in English. I'm not sure. It's a retailer company that was created in France with a small store, and now they have 400 stores in the world. And they are one of those companies with a very strong vision that in the end, I interviewed two people from that company in my book, and one of them is Nicolas Cordier, who created the social business orientation within Leroy Merlin. So it's a way to combine, social activism and being sustainable as a business. So it's not a foundation, it's not an association, it's actually a business that can support itself and that is turned towards society. So it's a broader way of achieving what Leroy Merlin has been trying to do, which is help people improve their house or their apartment, the place where they live, and sometimes helping people where the place is not only a place they would like to improve, but a place where if they didn't do anything, they could actually not live. So it has a really deep impact, and that impact involves people who are not clients of the stores. So it's really when I see how far the impact of the companies can go, it fascinates me. So I'm glad to be part of that movement and of that dynamic.
In this global world we live in today, the reach of everyone is the ability to get so far so fast is amazing, as evidenced by literally the number of time zones we have on the call here today.
Yeah.
That is awesome how you've gained this perspective where you can focus on sustainability and helping others, what I like to call win, if you will, to simplify it, and really still having a positive impact on your own business by doing good and helping the world and people have a better place. That is fantastic. Yeah. So, when you think about this book here, Lorraine, and by the way, for those who don't know, Lorraine is doing a special pricing right now in the book, $2.99 in the ebook for the next few days. So please go out and get your copy today. I did drop the link in the chat there if you want to grab a copy right now. But when you think about the book, Lorraine, shared decision making, what do you really hope readers take away?
So what I like to refer to the first quote in the book, which is anonymous. No one knows where it comes from, but it says that the best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is now. So that tells you sort of the intention behind the book, which is if you look around, you see all those companies, very different companies, as I said, very different countries, very different industries, very different people too, because not every leader or every team is the same. And by gathering that many stories, I'm hoping that some of them will resonate for different people. So maybe you are in the process of changing the way decisions are made and you would like to give more leeway to your teams and you wonder where to get started or what could be your North Star. And I'm hoping that some of the stories will resonate for you. Maybe you have tried things already and they went well or not that well, and you're trying to renew your action or your initiatives around decision making. And again, maybe different stories will resonate for you. So I'm really hoping that there is something for every leader and every team, because sometimes those organizations change from within at the managerial level. It's not always the top level that changes the way to make decisions. So I worked on an index where you can actually focus on different organizations. You can find the name of the organizations that I talk about. You can focus on the outcome that you might expect from making decisions in a different way with a very practical intention. So I'm really hoping that people read the book either from cover to cover or just a few stories, but then they realize that there is a way to find their own path, starting from very different bricks, I would say, to build that initiative. And that's what I hope for, to really inspire people and show them that they're not alone in the process.
Right. And I want to dig into something you said in there that really got my attention, which is one, there's not sort of a perfect runway to do this, but it's about bringing this collectivism to the group to get everybody involved. But so many times I find managers in my own work feel a bit stuck and say, well, gosh, if I give my employees autonomy, then they're going to sort of take over and become slackers and this kind of thing. Lorraine, what would you say? You mentioned sort of finding a starting point. What would you say to somebody who's feeling a bit stuck with this and not sure how to begin?
It's a good question. I think that it can be sort of scary. I don't really like that word. I like to start with appreciation rather than fear or fixing something that's not working. And yet it's inevitable. If you're a manager and you're thinking, well, my teams will make more decisions, then, and we hear that all the time. If I'm a manager and my teams make decisions, then what's my role? What am I here for? And I can understand that the question pops up in your mind if you're a manager. And then it's all about exploring how you are going to turn your role from command and control to supporting your team and being there for them it's that notion of experimenting things. So oftentimes with my client, if I have a seminar or a workshop coming up, I will lead the experience that they can have, and then I will ask them for their feedback. What happened? What did they see? What did they notice? And oftentimes I know what they're going to say, but if I told them ahead of time, it would be me saying, this is going to be, interesting. This is what it's going to change in your conversation or in your action or in your decision or in your impact. When they say it because they went through the experience, you can see that it's completely different. It will stick. They will remember it, and they will have gone through the experience themselves. In that area with management, it's the same thing. They have to let the teams experiment and then switch their position and their posture. And it's the same thing with the teams. Sometimes you say we're going to empower more the teams, and they could think that it's going to be like, okay, it's like open bar with like it's okay, cool, I can do whatever I want. But that's why I hardly ever talk about autonomy without using the word responsibility in the same sentence, because once you make decisions, you have to own the decision and the consequences and the mistakes and the learnings. So there is a place to start for everyone. It can be, I would like my team to be happier when they come to work in the morning, which is a very good reason to start that kind of initiative. It can be, we are facing such a complex situation that I'll never manage to do it on my own. And so I need to build something with the team to make sure I'm going to find a solution. A quick story about that comes from the person I interviewed at Lego. He was a general manager in Romania at the time, and he shared the story. It's in the book. He shared the story about his account managers who overspent 1 year. And so he found himself as the general manager not being able to deliver the results that were expected that year. And so first, he was really not proud not to be and to be in line with the expected results. And he shares how instead of blaming the team, he actually brought them together and said, okay, this is the situation. We have to, provide as many sales as we can before the end of the year with the limited amount of money that we have left, because some people in the team had overspent. And they actually found a solution together to make the most of the situation that they had created. And the next year they overachieved, and the results were even better than expected that time. And so they changed a few things about the way to decide together and to own the situation that they had created together. So it's really about being together, both in the process of changing the way decisions are made, and in the process of what does it mean for each role. So that's part of the work we do together, to identify the roles in the organization, in the team, and to make sure that everyone knows what they're bringing and how far they can go.
What I so appreciate about that story is that so many times, or almost always, we're tasked with do more with less, right? We never get the memo that says, hey, do less with more, right? That never happens. And so when we do that, right, oftentimes, what do? We say, well, how is this going to impact me? And we go into our little rabbit hole bunker or whatever, and focus on how do I sort of survive this circumstance, and many times don't look out for others. And what I love about that story is you bring everybody into that decision, and suddenly we say, how can we do this for the greater good? I had the great privilege of interviewing David Gardner, the co-founder of the Motley Fool, for my book, and they made a very similar decision in 2008, brought everybody into decision-making to cut costs, and they didn't let anybody go during that period. And yet they survived, saved a bunch of money, and found a way to not just survive, but thrive beyond that. It sounds like a similar story with Lego. I love that.
Absolutely. I think I've heard many stories during the COVID pandemic and all the turmoil that it created for companies. I think at that point, the notion of knowing why you come to the office or the factory or your clients every morning was very powerful. And also the notion of, as you said, keeping as many people as possible and possibly everyone on board, and finding other ways to face the difficult situation was really powerful with companies that had a strong purpose or a strong vision, and people really knew why they were there. And I think that the COVID pandemic created a deeper sense of the need for meaning in what we do, individually and collectively.
It's so important to have that meaning, that purpose behind it, right? Otherwise, we're punching a clock and trying to get out of work as fast as we can. I think of the old Fred Flintstone cartoon, right? The buzzer would go off if for my friends in America that might know that one, and he would just take off from work immediately, right? That's not what we're looking for. We want people to be engaged and inspired by the work that we do. And that's where the mission and vision and purpose becomes so powerful. I love doing work around that. Lucia asked me to drop the link back in the chat again. I just put it in there. Lucia Lavato, is that how I say it? I hope I'm getting that name right. And Lorraine's book, as I said, is available right now. And if you like some of these stories you're hearing, if you like it impact others, I would certainly encourage you to not just get a copy for yourself, but go out and get copies for a few of your friends. And another offer Lorraine is doing right now is if you go out and get a copy of her, sign up for her newsletter, she'll send you a free copy of her book for the first 10 people that do that. You can do so at codynamics.net. I'll drop the hot link in the chat here in just a minute. And Lorraine, so when we write a book, many times authors come into a book and they say, gosh, I'm going to share all this knowledge I have with the world. And in fact, it turns out they learn a lot throughout writing the book, researching, interviewing people, speaking with others. What would you say you learned while going through this journey?
Well, I learned what some of the companies I talk about have learned as well. And I have to say that one of the reasons why I went into writing a book was to learn. I'm a learner. That's my number one strength, the Strength Finder test.
Yeah.
I like to learn. I like to try new things. And so I figured it would be one more way out of my comfort zone. And I was not mistaken on that one. So to explore new areas, new skills, new activities, actually, new tasks to take on. And I think one of the things I learned and it connects to what you were saying about the purpose and the culture. It's really about building on the culture and the core of the company to face a new challenge and to approach new objectives and new targets. One of the stories about that was about Airbus. It's the largest aerospace and space company in Europe, which is a consortium of different European companies. And I had the privilege to interview the guy who was in charge of the A380 program at the time. So it was really the flagship of Airbus at the time. And they had to speed up the production like 3 times as fast as what they used to do. And he tells the story of how he noticed that some of the teams, he had met some of them before, were capable of doing more. Plus, they had that huge challenge. And what they did is come up together to create that vision of what they wanted to be as Airbus. It's a very high expectations in terms of the outcome of the production is very demanding. And so they built together, they built on the vision, crafted the vision for the program, and they really sped up everything and made the people decide more how they would organize their work rather than tell them, this is the factory, you do this, that team does that. They actually created sort of mini factories for a while, and they experimented with a small group and then a larger group. And then they shared that vision with all the teams. And all the teams could see that it was really their vision. It was really for them. If they had taken the vision of, I don't know, Coca-Cola for their factory, it wouldn't have worked, obviously. And so that's one of the things that you learn. It's like, I felt the same writing the book. I had to select some of the stories. I couldn't talk about all the organizations I was interested in. That was a very hard decision. And so, yeah, you have to build on what is really at the core to face the challenge and then bring people to organize in a different way. So obviously at the beginning it was difficult, but then they realized that they had the power to make decisions differently. For example, they used a different way to select their leaders. So it was not just the leader who would, be promoted by someone above in the hierarchy. It was actually a selection process in the teams. So the first time around, it was more like he mentioned, Morfois, who is the head of the program, mentions how it was more handled like a presidential election, with a few candidates and people voting, for or against. And then after 2 or 3 rounds, they realized that it was really it has nothing to do with the presidential election. It's more about people willing to take charge, actually, and other people thinking that they're the right people to do that exact task.
So powerful, and just giving people a voice, giving them ownership. And it's such a key thing that I think so many times we can get caught up and forget about when we're all running on this hamster wheel, right? It seems so many hours in the day and it never ends. And oh, wait a minute, I have to sort of understand my team and understand how to bring them into this journey together. And it sounds so insurmountable many times, but when you start to get this process in motion, it can become so powerful. And connecting with your team on a different level and seeing what happens when they become this really amazing version of themselves, which oftentimes can hide. And I've seen that so many times over the years where these incredibly talented people aren't bringing their full selves to work because they don't feel empowered to do so. So such a powerful message.
And as you said, part of that work, I remember during the interview, Jean-Luc Morfoist mentioned that part of the work was about the decision making and the vision and the organization and the role of the managers, because again, the managers used to handle, I think, several hundred people at a time, and they sort of became the new organization made that way of handling the teams useless in a way. So they had to really switch to a different way to support the team. And I remember that he told me one of the first things they do was to create training programs about things like respecting others, talking to others, giving feedback, things that you would say are natural and inevitable in a team. And yet, I can see with my clients that that kind of work is necessary. So it's not always about changing everything and turning the pyramid upside down. Sometimes it is, but it doesn't have to be. It's also about connecting and listening also.
So important to connect with people. We're all humans. At the end of the day, without humans, nothing gets done, right? And one of my favorite interviews from my book, and a Microsoft executive, Philip Holt, shared a thought. He's run gaming companies for many years, and he shared a thought with me that was, he said, no problem he's ever had is a technology issue. It's always come down to a human issue and how they interact or don't interact. And I'm really working on improving that is so powerful. We are going to move to the rapid fire segment here in just a few minutes, ladies and gentlemen. So please, if you do have questions or comments, we can certainly answer those here. So drop them in the chat if you have one for Lorraine. But for those thinking about writing a book, Lorraine, I've got a couple of questions around this. Given your busy and demanding schedule with all the clients you're working with, how did you fit this into your life, the whole book journey?
It's a huge question. I'm not sure I have the answer yet.
Somehow you did it.
Yeah, I did it. I think, I thought about this, and I think my answer, so I really don't have the method. I have understood everything, and here is how I did it, and you can do the same. I'm not at this stage, but what I can say is that I did more, and I keep doing more, something that was not necessarily usual for me, which was really block big chunks of time in my schedule, like 2, 3, 4 hours. I shut down everything, no phone, no email, nothing. I just shut off all the programs I don't need, and I just focus on one thing at a time. And it is difficult to do, and I'm sure that some, listening to me now would say, how can you do that? You have clients, you have peers, you have partners, you have to answer. And yet, I think it made me, in the end, it's just like what you were saying earlier. It takes time at the beginning, and then you speed up. I think it's exactly the same. When you focus for 3 hours on one topic, you become much more productive, and you finish what you have to do, and then you can move on peacefully to something else that you will do fully. And I do that more and more now. So that would be my answer.
I love that. That time blocking is so important, because I've certainly found when I was writing, it just takes an intense amount of focus, and having some kind of structure or time blocking and to really get it done is just so important. I love that you have found a way to get that done, because it's not easy, and it's simply a matter of hours, and you just need to find time to create those hours. So goals for 2023 in the book, Lorraine, what are we thinking about there?
I think I would like to keep doing what I've been doing in the last few years, which is helping with those collective dynamics, and more specifically about the decision-making piece. I often say that collective dynamics is about removing the barrier between decision and action by bringing as many people together as early as possible in a process. It can be a project, it can be a new team. And with autonomy and responsibility, it's the same idea, maybe one step further, because we really touch upon the decision-making piece. So I'm hoping to keep doing that with, more international teams. And I've been thinking that adding the French and English languages to the projects could be something I could do in Canada. So maybe that's one of the goals for 2023 to start. I've been connecting with Canadian peers already. And so maybe before the end of the year, I'd like to do more work in Canada if I have a chance.
Interesting. I love how many countries you've worked in now, hundreds of companies, and just an extraordinary message out there. If there's is there a conference or anything like that you're targeting you'd love to do a talk for?
Yeah, that's a good point. I actually one of my recent assignment was with the local branch of a multinational company, and we started with a conference about decision making. And I figured it was a great way for the teams to get to know who I was and what I was talking about. And so when I started interviewing them and doing workshops with them, it made our work much easier because they had an idea of what I was all about. So maybe, conferences and workshops with clients who would be interested in hearing more about the examples and the concepts behind the examples would be a fun way to interact and to see, where they want to go with that topic. That would be great.
Such a great way to get the message out there. And as I shared before, if you do sign up if you want to learn more about Lorraine and her story, definitely go visit and sign up for her newsletter. For the first 10 people that do that, she'll send you a free copy of her ebook. So check that out. I just dropped the link in the chat there. And, maybe if you have some ideas for conferences that you think Lorraine's message might resonate with, by all means, share that as well. So we are going to shift gears to the rapid fire questions here in just a second. So again, if you have questions, comments, by all means, drop them in the chat. Continue to see listeners and folks joining us from all over the place. Minnesota, India, of course, right? It's amazing to see. There's 3 in a row right there in the chat, different friends.
Oh, Hélène Abraham was a member of the leadership team of HOP when I worked with them. So hi, Hélène. It's a pleasure to see you today.
Thank you for joining us. Got someone joining us, a gentleman from Pakistan calling in. I mean, just incredible, the global reach that you've created out there for yourself, Lorraine. So lovely. So are you ready to jump into the rapid fire questions here?
I'm ready.
This is always my favorite part. And I think a great place to start, everybody eats, right? Lorraine, what is your favorite thing to cook?
Oh, that's a good one. I like to bake desserts, and especially tiramisu is my signature dessert. Very popular with my kids.
Now I want dessert already, and it's not even lunchtime yet here in the U.S. on the East Coast. Favorite color? I have a hunch based on your book cover, but what are we going to go with there?
Oh yeah, well, I don't really have a favorite color, in general, but given the circumstances of this session, I would say teal would be a nice color to pick because it's a nice color in itself, and part of it is in my book. Like the little character have that color on the cover of my book, and it's actually, as many of you probably know, the name of a framework where teams are self-managed. So it's a good reference.
So teal is an acronym for self-managed?
Teal.
Interesting.
It's not an acronym, actually. Oh. Teal is a color in itself.
Of course.
And it's one of the models in the book, Reinventing Organizations. It's the sort of ultimate model where self-management is running the show.
That is fantastic. I love that. Is there, I have to drop this comment in the chat here. You've got a super fan out there, Dr. Fersman. Good morning from Minnesota. Thank you again for being a rock star at the 2014 Kiev Peace Summit. Holy cow.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah, that was something. Thank you, Richard. Yeah, that was a great moment in my life, not just my career. Yeah, I was lucky enough to be part of the team that helped the organizer of the Peace Summit in Kiev, well, a few years before the war. And yeah, that's what you can do. My work is with organizations and helping them with a responsibility toward the world. But actually, those people working in these organizations, when they leave their office or factory or store, when they go back to their families, their neighborhood, they are just citizens of the world. So that's what we can impact, actually. So thank you, Richard. I'm so glad to see you today.
All the way from Minnesota, where I have some family as well. Thank you for joining us, Richard. And wow, Kiev, that's yeah, sad story. Favorite or most memorable vacation spot for you, my friend?
You know what? I'm going to say it the next time, next spot. I love to travel, as you have figured out from the different places where I've worked. So yeah, I would say favorite vacation spot is the one I haven't been to yet.
I love it. I just took a road trip with my family, which was super fun.
Yeah.
I forgot. I used to do that as a kid, and forgot how much fun those were. To instead of just getting on an airplane and appearing somewhere else, right? Sort of seeing all these spots along the way, and really enjoyed that as a summer trip with my family. Favorite movie?
Oh, Singing in the Rain.
Singing
For many reasons. Yes. It's the movie. It's a movie about a musical, so it gathers everything. Plus, it's the story of how to move from the silent era to the speaking era. So there's everything there, and Gene Kelly, of course. So yeah,
Is it fair to
my
say
favorite ever.
Are you a bit of a Renaissance person? Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm not sure if it means the same for you and for me, Renaissance person.
We've hit our first cultural divide. So someone who appreciates the past and the change. Yes, yeah. Speaking of French person now, aren't I? Yes, I need to do some more studying before I ask that question. But I love that story, and what a lovely movie. And we're going to come back to that in a second here with another question. But first concert you went to, Lorraine?
Oh, that's a question I love, because I suspect that. So let's get back to the beginning of the story. I think I was 8 years old. I was taking music lessons in my music school, where I was about to start learning how to play the flute, which I still play to this day. And at some point, they needed as many kids as possible to sing in the choir of a show, like in an actual real theater, huge stage, huge audience. And so I was part of the choir. The only thing I remember is that I had a blast, and I think it was the first concert I went to.
And you performed in it?
Yes, I did.
This is a first on Meet the Author Live, where the first concert somebody went to was when they performed it. So thank you.
Yeah, well, I was 8, and I was not a solo performer. So really, I don't know if I did much, but I don't remember the songs or anything. I hardly remember the rehearsals, and I do remember the connection with the adult singers and the fun that we had. And I like being on stage.
I love it. So that is a great segue to our next question here, which is a favorite song to sing with or without an audience. So we've got Singing in the Rain. We've got this 8-year-old concert. What's the top of the list there?
I would say Dream a Little Bit of Dream a Little Bit of Me is the name. Yeah, Dream a Little Dream of Me. Yeah. I don't sing much, actually, because I switched to playing an instrument, and that's much more my area of development than singing. But sometimes I do sing that song because I like it.
Very nice. Very nice. And here's one of my favorites. Last photo on your phone.
Oh, my kids eating tiramisu.
It's all coming full circle here, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
I love it.
I think 2 of them, because one is she's doing an internship in Italy, and so I just had my 2 sons with me this week, and we had tiramisu to celebrate.
What a beautiful picture. Mine, actually, I just looked a minute ago, is I went for a walk with my son last night, and we got a great picture of us at sunset, which was really fun.
Wow. Very nice.
Thank you. What is one thing you own that you really should get rid of, Lorraine?
I'm not sure I have an answer to that question. I tend to not keep things that I don't need most of the time, and I have a few things I don't need but I like, but not too many of them. So I don't think I have an answer to that question. Well, maybe I have a piece of clothing that I could get rid of and still in my cupboard, but doesn't bother me too much. So yeah, I don't think I have an answer.
Fair enough. Let's get back to goals. I know you've talked a little bit about some audacious goals, or maybe some big goals for the book, and now that it's out there in the world, what's the most audacious goal you've come up with for your book and the journey ahead?
Well, speaking about it as much as I can, which doesn't seem, in a way, it's a natural step. After you write the book, you want to talk about it and get more people to figure out what's in it and have a chance to make the best use of the stories in it. So maybe, yeah, speaking more. I don't think I have an audacious goal in terms of something that could not be, done. It's more, I tend to have goals that are, yeah, doable, I would say. So yeah, maybe speak more to larger audiences in different countries. Maybe that would be more audacious than just Europe.
Well, you've already got such a global audience. No doubt you're well
Sure.
on your way. I know you've got a number of incredible praise quotes for your book, which if people don't know that term, those are the quotes you see on the back of the book. What's one like you'd like to share with our listeners here?
I tend to have a hard time choosing one thing out of many, and that one I can't. I was so that's one of the great moments in writing this book, the connections that it created, and I was so it's impressive. Again, when I said I didn't realize as much what it was like to write a book and to publish a book, and others made me realize how important it was. And for the quotes, it's about the same. I'm so grateful that people I really admire gave me really generous comments, either because they were leaders or because they were authors, and I respect their work so much. I was amazed actually by the quotes, and every time someone tells me about my book, I'm so happy that it can be useful and that it can bring, shed a new light on autonomy, responsibility, the collective of an organization in general. So I won't pick one. I can't.
It's like picking your
Sorry.
favorite. It's like picking your favorite child, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
And for
Same
those,
idea.
I'm going to make a nuanced point to our listeners out there, which is you saw how much Lorraine and authors appreciate any kind of feedback and comments you get. If you haven't gone out and written a review for Lorraine on Amazon yet, or Barnes & Noble, or wherever you like to buy books, definitely encourage you to go out and do that. It's certainly something that I know as an author myself certainly appreciate. What would you say was the most memorable moment in your writing journey, Lorraine, as you went through the book?
I would say one was well, definitely when maybe if I had to pick one, I guess it would be the moment when I shared drafts of my chapters with readers, because in a way to do that, I read the book out loud and I printed it out. So for the first time, I saw my book as an entire text, beginning to the end, on paper. So it sort of started becoming real, and sharing them with people outside of the team that was involved in the book with the publisher was definitely it was a bit scary, I have to say, a bit impressive, and it turned out to be a pretty positive moment. But that was memorable, I would say.
little scary when we create something and start to share it with others, because excuse me, one of the things about books is they are very permanent, aren't they? And once it goes to publishing, that's it, and that's how it will live till the end of time. And so it's a little bit intimidating. So getting that first toe in the water with getting feedback can be a little scary.
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing that. And what would you say has been the best part about being an author so far?
Oh, definitely the connections. I among the 19 people I interviewed, I think I know less than half of them, maybe even less. So I actually contacted people because I wanted to talk about their company, and some said yes, some didn't answer. I'm super happy, for example, that the former HR director of Patagonia answered. I didn't think he would, but I figured if I don't try, obviously he will not say yes. So let's try, and he said yes. And so the connection with people for the interviews, connection with people because I didn't interview all the companies I talk about, but I informed some people that I was quoting them in my book, and they answered. Some of them I talked to, and we created a new connection. So, and the connection with people who are interested in the book, even if they didn't know that I was writing it, or they had not heard about the company or the story before, and when they realized that, sometimes they say, oh, I didn't know that so many companies were involved, or I didn't know how many people were involved in those initiatives. So the connection with people who are interested by the topic is also adding to previous ones. And so, yeah, connection definitely in all directions. And that's super fun. And one thing that I heard from the people I interviewed is it's one of those moments where I felt like I was asking them a favor by giving me some time to discuss what they had done and to share the outcome of their story that they already knew. And some of them told me, actually thanked me because I was giving them a chance to step back and reflect on what they had done. And sometimes my question or my reactions led them to more, I don't know, understanding or different ways to observe what they had done. So they also appreciated the notion of stopping and thinking about what they had done and their own story. So I think it's that connection is very, very positive for everyone.
I love this theme, this thread of connection, which of course drives collective thinking. You can't have collective thinking without some kind of connection between all the folks. And I love
True.
that theme just recurs over and over again in your life and your work. What a beautiful message. Lorraine, how would you describe your writing journey in 5 words? Not necessarily, a sentence.
I tried 5 words. And I just couldn't. That's too much. What I found, I thought about this, and what I ended up with is, I would say, a succession of very different challenges that helped me make the most of the intention I had when I started writing the book.
That is a beautiful way to frame it. Maybe 20 words, but still
Okay.
Beautifully articulated. And I love it. And this theme of just collectivism and empowering others and really taking that step back, if you will, to take many steps forward when you bring everyone into the journey is just so, so important. And I love this message you have out there. So closing thoughts for all these lovely folks that joined us here today.
Well, I keep having conversations. No later than yesterday, I met with someone I quote in the book, even though I didn't interview that person. And oftentimes we end our conversation by saying that we could do much better with what we have in this world. And so at the corporate level, that's what I'm hoping we can do. We have a lot of people, different people, talented people, engaged people. Some are young, some are not that young, some are experimented, some are not, some are switching jobs, trying new things that they've never done before. Some prefer to stay in their comfort zone where they're experts, and that's fine. We can bring all those people to do the most. Really, there is so much we can do. We are so powerful if we bring all that talent and skills and initiative together. So I'm really hoping that at the corporate level, and as we said earlier, that impacts the entire society and environment around us, we can do so much better. So just let's do it together.
Let's do it together. Things will get better. We have an impact that's global, and let's make sure we're aware of that and see what we can do to help raise everybody up, right? Such a powerful message, Lorraine. I absolutely love it. For those folks that want to learn more about Lorraine, you can certainly connect with her on LinkedIn at Lorraine Margherita Collective Dynamics, and her website, co-dynamics.net, to learn more about her and her story. And as I shared earlier, if you want to get a copy of Lorraine's newsletter, I dropped a link in the chat here as well. And for the first 10 folks that sign up for the newsletter, she's happy to send out a free ebook for those folks. So definitely go check that out and learn more about her story. Lorraine, thank you so much for sharing your story with Meet the Author Live. It's really a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you very much, John. It was a pleasure, really, always.
It's been such a joy to work with you and map this out. And thanks to our listeners for joining this episode of Meet the Author Live. Definitely go check out Lorraine's book, Shared Decision Making, the Corporate Arena, available now wherever you buy books online. And definitely go visit her website and LinkedIn profile. If you want to see more episodes of Meet the Author Live, certainly connect with me on LinkedIn, JCS Optimizer on LinkedIn. But thank you so much for joining us today from all over the world. Really appreciate everyone joining us. As I said, I'm your host, John Saunders. Keep creating out there and look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.